Okay. Yeah. Good morning. The speaker of the day, Dr. Ashwati Rachel Varghese, chair of the session, Dr. Indrajit Bairagya, discussant, Dr. Vajaspati Shukla, participants, I am sure there must be participants online. You are especially welcomed. And of course, my obvious welcome to those who are physically present. I think my job is almost over, but I think if I don't say something, you may feel bad. So I think the topic of today's seminar is very contemporary and very relevant. In the morning, I happened to look at Higher Education Council website for some other purpose. I had an opportunity to scan through Kerala's higher education policy or something like that in 2012. And in 2022, Kerala government has come up with a committee report, a very well articulated committee report on higher education in the state. And wherein, you know that Kerala has one of the highest gross higher education enrollment ratio of the order of 38%. It is pretty high as compared to national level, which you will know. How much is it now? 20? 27, yeah, almost more than 10%. And I think this is another indicator in which Kerala is doing well, along with other usual HDI, SDG indicators. And we are aiming at making it to something like 60% by 2031. And we have a tall target of 75%. I don't exactly remember, something like 2040. And notwithstanding all our achievements in the area of education and education-derived benefits, there are also a number of issues that we are confronted with respect to all aspects of education, which I think in 2010, we have Spitoda and others came with the national policy with the focus on inclusion, excellence, and equity. And those issues are actually still remaining. And in which one of the core component of it is in fact financing education development. So what should be, and I think in the last meeting here, if you all remember the discussion in which our former cabinet secretary was making the case for increasing role of a higher role of private universities, so on and so forth. And these quintessentially boils down to the issue of financing. And the paper, as I understand, takes a very interesting deviation from the conventional understanding of financing education, essentially as the government or public sector, the role of financing by the household. It is essentially not received much attention. Of course, we have Theodore Schultz and even Charles Schultz worked on returns to education in the public sphere and public returns and private returns. But in the Indian context and in the Kerala context, I think particularly this issue is very pertinent. And I congratulate the speaker for facilitating this discussion. And I am also highly appreciative of our coordinators because they have lined up three speakers who are, normally you expect I'm the only old man, all are youngsters. And that is what is very important. It is your agenda, actually. Whatever we have got so far, and whatever challenges and concerns that we have is the contribution of the previous generation. And it is your job to sort out the way forward. And I'm very happy that you have a highly dynamic and budding chair and discussant. You know, Indrajit, Professor Dr. Indrajit Bairagya is currently an assistant professor in the economics in the ISEC, Institute for Economic and Social Change in Bangalore, and he had his PhD in. I can continue, you know. Okay, he had his PhD from ISEC, and subsequently he has made very interesting contribution in the area of his expertise, which I think I understand that he has worked on informal sector. And can someone switch on? Okay, because power went off. We are keeping. I was thinking that we are going to be in dark despite these brightening ideas. So his reason and his area of interest. What did you say? Okay, yeah. His area of interest is equally important. Areas of interest are equally important: informal sector and informal employment, economics of education, applied econometrics, and input-output analysis and computable general CGE modeling. Very frontier areas, and his competence, I understand, are very relevant for policy-oriented and theoretical work. And he has a recent book which is published by Routledge, Routledge and Taylor Francis Group, on liberalization and performance of informal sector, a study of Indian economy. And I was very impressed by the list of publications that we have, that he has, dealing with skill-based employment linkage, skill-based employment linkages across sectors, group-based education inequalities, household spending on education, determinants of quality of higher education, so on and so forth. And all this makes Dr. Bairagya the most appropriate chairperson of to chair the session. And we also have a equally competent discussant, Dr. Vajaspati Shukla from Sardar Patel Institute of Economic and Social Research, who had his MPhil and PhD training in Center for Development Studies. And I had the opportunity to grow, to see how Dr. Vajaspati was growing into a very, very vibrant academician. And he also has his specialization or research interest in economic aspects of education, issues relating to poverty and inequality in relation and its linkage with education, and again, labor market, employment, and development within the framework of education attainment. And his publications in the issues relating to literacy achievement in India, group disparities, educational outcomes, education expansion and schooling inequality, and I'm only listing some of them: India's poverty and the inclusion, and how to what extent the reduction in India's inequality has been inclusive. I mean, very pertinent questions has been attracting his attention. I'm very, very happy that these two young scholars have joined today for us, as chair and discussant. I most warmly welcome. Of course, a special welcome to the chair and the discussant on behalf of Vilayat Institute of Finance and Taxation, Vilayat GIFT community, and all those who are present here. And I must also welcome all those who have joined online. And indeed, to our speaker, a special welcome. And with these words, I think I will request the chair of the day to chair this session and conduct the proceeding. Over to you, Dr. Indrajit Bairagya.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you once again for giving generous introduction. I was thinking that you are very generous while introducing me. But a very good morning, one and all. Today we have a very interesting and important topic for discussion. that public and household financing of education in India are the substitutes and complements. As Professor Joseph has already mentioned that India, since independence, India is had to tackle several of the issues related to this education sector. And if we highlight and if we club these issues into two groups, one is definitely equity and second is quality. So equity with quality, in terms of enrollment, India is able to achieve to some extent, even though heterogeneity exists across states. But when it comes to this quality of education, still we could see a dismal picture, and this picture is even worse when it goes to this higher education. But this, to enhance both this the accessibility as well as quality, financing plays an important role. And here, as you know, this in macroeconomics, we had a long-standing debate on this relationship between public investment and private investment from the supply side. That crowd out effect happens when there is an increase in this investment from the public sector that drives down the investment of this private sector. But here the interesting issue is, Ashwati is not going to discuss from the relationship of public and private investment from the supply side, where but she is going to discuss that public investment from the supply side and how does it complements or is there any substitutability with the household spending from the demand side. And this is very interesting topic. I feel again why, because this India is passing through a phase of demographic dividend, and if we see this public expenditure in education is quite flat for quite some time. And there is again a long-standing discussion that whether we should have a more percentage of GDP for education sector in general, and then different levels of the levels of education in particular, whether we should have more spending for primary education or we should the more spending should go for higher education. So these discussions are there. So we would be very happy to listen Ashwati today. Ashwati, if I introduce Ashwati, Ashwati is known to me because she has done PhD at Institute for Social and Economic Change with me. And this is the topic. I think she has done some extension, but the primary analysis was part of her PhD. This is Ashwati is an excellent scholar, and she has published a large number of articles. It's a renowned article. If I take this the name, that's her first article appeared in International Journal of Educational Development. The impact factor is more than 2. And then she had her second publication from PhD thesis, Structural Change and Economic Dynamics. It is again published by Elsevier, and its impact factor today is more than 6. And it is one of the very prestigious journal in academic community today. She has even again a recent publication in Indian Economic Review, and she had published even in the 2 articles in the EPW. So she has done kind of the very good publications from her PhD thesis as well as from other areas. But I am glad that now she got an appropriate platform to explore and extend her skill. But previous to joining this GIFT, she worked as manager at Canara Bank, Bangalore, and as an economist. And she worked as faculty member in QSAT, Cochin, as well as Christ University, Bengaluru. So I won't take much time because let Ashwati make her presentation. Ashwati, you can take about 30 minutes. Then our formal discussion, Dr. Bachaspati will take about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we will have open forum discussion. Then you can again answer the queries or clarification comes from the floor as well as from a discussion. So now floor is yours, Ashwati.
Thank you, sir. Let me share the screen. So, good morning, everyone. I am extremely happy to present one of my research outcomes before the gift audience today. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And I would like to remind you that it's a progressing work as well. So, kind of remarks and criticisms, etc., are welcome to improve this work of mine. And I thank the seminar coordinators as well. And more than that, I'm extremely blessed and privileged to have Indrajit sir chairing this session because he's my mentor, supervisor, and guide. And thank you so much, sir. And he's a veteran in economics of education. And my thanks are due to Dr. Vajaspati, who has agreed to be the discussant of this session. So today, I'm going to discuss with you a topic which is public and household education expenditure. Are they substitutes or complements across Indian states? When we discuss about education financing broadly, three elements usually come to our mind. One is the public expenditure, which is through the budgetary provisions of the government, both through the central and state governments. And then investments by non-governmental agencies, private parties, and definitely the household level spending on education. That is spending by the families for educating their kids. And you have different components there, tuition fees, books and stationery, then transportation, miscellaneous items, hostel fees, etc. So with respect to education financing, there are two broad strands of literature, which I spoke about public financing, which is mainly viewed from the supply side of education, and household spending, which is viewed from the demand side of education. Of course, in academia, there are a lot of debates and discussions on public spending on education, its trends and patterns over a period of time, and determinants of public spending, quality of public spending, and how it is having a nexus with broader macroeconomic variables, especially with the growth and all. And similarly, we have discussions on household level education expenditure, determinants, socioeconomic inequalities, and all. But the problem with all this is both expenditure are important for a individual's academic progress, but they are mostly studied in a separate compartments. So our question is, how, even if they are important or studied in a separate manner, are they independent in the real sense? So there are some related literature to it. International literature, basically. It speaks about the private supplementation of government provision of education. And from the Indian context, some have done the public and private education divide, taking education expenditure as one of the educational input and the political ramifications of it. So basically, when the literature analyzed the nature of relationship between private and public expenditure, usually they have taken the aggregate consumption expenditure, not by the spending categories. So there is another study, interesting study by Lahiri, that is the degree of substitutability between both the expenditure, which has a long-term impact on macroeconomic variables, especially on optimal taxes. So given this research gap, we have identified a broader research question, that is, what could be the nature of relationship between public and household education expenditure? So these are the specific objectives: to analyze the nature of public and household education expenditure at macro level from the Indian context, then to investigate or examine the degree of substitutability between these kinds of expenditure, and we have to examine it based on the intertemporal utility maximization framework. So this is a broad conceptual framework I've given for the study. As I mentioned earlier, we have expenditure on education, public spending, and household level spending. And we are, of course, examining the substitutability or complementarity between the expenditure from the Edgeworth-Pareto sense, not from the traditional Hicks-Allen sense, and which I will be explaining in the later part of my explanation. It's based on the intertemporal utility maximization framework. So what is this Edgeworth-Pareto substitutes and complements now? So it is the name, it's comprising of 4 economists, and precisely you call it as Edgeworth-Pareto. Auspitz, Laban, Edgeworth-Pareto, allied substitutes and complements. So what are they? So you have 2 kinds of expenditure A and expenditure B. So when you increase the quantity of expenditure B, what could be the marginal utility you derive from expenditure A? So that is the treatment of allied substitutes or complements. and which is different from our conventional concept of substitutes and complements. Like you substitute perfectly substitutable goods you are having, and you substitute good A for good B, and then you if it is jointly consumed, you call it as complements. But here it is not in the traditional or conventional concept. So what is the justification for using this kind of a theoretical framework? So this justification actually takes its root from a linear expenditure system and demand analysis. And Stone give an explanation for this. When you have a basket of unrelated commodities, because your consumption expenditure basket is a composite basket, right? You have health, education, transportation, clothes, apparels, miscellaneous, etc. So when you have that kind of a composite basket or not perfectly substitutable or non-substitutable commodities, utility approach takes a different route altogether. So you have a utility function of a representative consumer. You maximize the utility function with respect to the respective budget constraint of the stakeholder. So there are many proofs available for this kind of an approach. And basically it is coming from the Austrian school of economic thought, where they consider marginal utility is ordinal and not cardinal. So I'll just touch upon the extent studies based on this framework. So as I mentioned earlier, whoever has analyzed the nature of this kind of an expenditure, they broadly analyzed it for the aggregate consumption expenditure. And some have done it by the spending categories for some international studies. And we followed this kind of theoretical background from these studies, which they have done it for the cross-country analysis. But I have found that a lot of empirical ambiguities are there when you have different specifications of the utility function. When it is a linear utility function, you get different results. When it is non-linear utility function, you get altogether different results. So basically analyzing this kind of a thing from the Indian context, it is totally new. And I would like to touch upon more about the theoretical and empirical framework. And here is the linear specification of the utility function in the expected terms. And beta is the subjective discount factor. And C star T is the effective aggregate expenditure. So what is this effective aggregate expenditure? It comprises of your household level expenditure as well as government expenditure, to whatever expenditure you are referring. So what we have done is we have bifurcated it into education expenditure and non-education expenditure, both for the household as well as for the government. And we get a full-fledged utility function here. But in the full-fledged utility function, you can see that there are parameters for government expenditures. So why is it so? Because the assumption of this model is that government expenditure is exogenously determined through the budgetary provisions. So households do not have a complete control or explicit control over these kinds of expenditure. So we have different parameters for the government expenditure. Then this is the structure of the budget constraint of the representative consumer. That is, AT is the financial wealth, the accumulated financial wealth, which is a stock concept, and WT is the income, which is a flow concept, as you know. And 1 plus tau T is the net lump sum taxes what the representative consumer is paying, and 1 plus R is the discount factor. So now our job is to maximize. So now we have set a utility function, and now our job is to maximize this utility function with respect to the budget constraint. And while doing this maximization process, we can convert it to an Euler's equation format. So Euler's equation format, you have the discount factors of representative respective stakeholders. And then you have in the numerator the first derivative of the aggregate expenditure, effective aggregate expenditure, and the expected value of the derivative of the effective aggregate expenditure for the next time period. So doing we have converted this kind of a mathematical equation into an estimable econometric equation. The process I will just outline it in the later slide. So before that, I just want to outline that the exercise we have done it for the linear utility function. Similarly, we have done it for the non-linear utility function. So mainly studies have done it based on Cobb-Douglas utility function and CES and VES forms, etc. So here we have taken for this study is the Cobb-Douglas utility function to check with the nonlinear form of utility function. The same exercise has been carried out for this thing, and CIT and GIT are the spending categories, if you can see. So we have converted it in the Euler's equation format, and again, the estimable econometric equation. So the process broadly I have followed, that is the empirical methodology have been taken from Hall and Karras. The change in the marginal utility from, because you need marginal utility for your analysis, because that is the whole definition of the allied substitutes or allied complements. So marginal utility, how do you get? You have the utility function, U dash is the marginal utility. The change in marginal utility from one time period to another follows a near random walk. And then the marginal utility of effective consumption, effective aggregate expenditure has been taken into account. And using a Taylor series approximation, we have converted it into the respective estimable equations for the linear, this one. And here we are having household education expenditure and government expenditure on education, and mu is the parameter of interest here. So after outlining about the theoretical framework, I would like to discuss about the descriptive analysis of the study. We are talking about the public expenditure on education and household education expenditure. So what are the trends in public spending on education over a period of time? So over a period of time, the percentage share in GDP has been stagnated, even though you have the rhetoric of 6% of GDP keeping aside for education, right from the Kothari Commission in 1960s and to the recent NEP 2020, but never it has happened, and almost it has stagnated over a period of time. And currently it is hovering around 2.9 to 3% of your GDP. And the per capita expenditure also, similarly, the CAGR, it's highly fluctuating. So as the study is based on at a state level study, so state-wise expenditure pattern, per capita public expenditure on education by Indian states. So it's we have divided it into high income, middle income, and low income states. And we can see that some trends in the sense, some middle income states like Tamil Nadu and Himachal Pradesh are doing better than some of the higher income states. And Odisha and West Bengal is comparatively better in terms of per capita public spending for the, even if they belong to a low income category. And in high income category, there are some exceptions also, as you can see. So similarly, what is the trend in household spending on education? So for this, we have taken average education expenditure at constant prices of 2011-12 over a period of starting from 1987 to 2018, covering all the rounds of NSSO. And you can see that CAGR is having a much leap compared to the CAGR of public per capita public expenditure. So this may be because of a higher demand for education, higher returns for education, because of considering the fact that there is higher returns for education, and secondly, availability of private educational institutions and the hefty fees charged by the private educational institutions. And then some of the prestige factors attached to it, like for the South Indian states, attaining higher level of education is certainly a prestigious thing. So all those institutional cultural factor associated with increased demand for education, which is reflected in the household level spending on education. Here also, we have the state-wise expenditure pattern, the average household expenditure by states. So high income, middle income, and low income. Here, as I analyzed, I could understand that mostly the average spending on household, spending by the household and the public expenditure, it is mostly going in tandem with the human development indices of the respective states, the income of the states, etc. And moreover, the educational outcome of the states. So coming to the empirical discussion, for the empirical analysis, we have done the static panel data analysis. So specification 1 is the linear utility function, and specification 2 is the non-linear utility function. So specification 1, we have the independent variable household education expenditure, and for specification 2, we have aggregate household expenditure. So the parameter we are interested in is public expenditure on education. And it is, we are taking the lagged values because as we got in the estimable equation, they have lagged values of household level education expenditure and public spending on education. Then the other control variables or independent variables we have taken as the income, per capita NSDP, then average years of schooling for each state, then other socioeconomic factors of the respective states. So the result and discussion basically, the empirical results basically reveals that at a macro level, public and household education expenditure are best explained as complementary in nature, because we are like certainly interested to know the direction and the significance of the new parameter new. So what does it mean exactly? Any increase in public spending on education, there will be a tendency to rise your marginal utility from household level expenditure. And this results are found robust for both specifications under linear and non-linear utility functions. So households can complement their efforts when there is an increased involvement from the government side, and household expenditure is guided by the public spending on education. These kinds of empirical conclusions, what is it pointing to? Is it pointing to any kind of policy discussions, basically? So for a developing country like India, is private supplementation of publicly provided good is a good option? When I talk about private supplementation, on what components households are roping in? So component-wise analysis, we can see that tuition fees commands the highest share among the household education expenditure, which is coming to some 65 to 70%, followed by books and stationery, then your hostel fees, and then your transportation and miscellaneous items. So when it comes to publicly provided goods, like soon after the East Asian miracle, all world nations were giving so much of thrust on heavy investments for human development, human capital formation, basically, especially education and health. But if you see the previous 2 decades, due to the evolving macroeconomic landscapes and new macroeconomic challenges, most of the government are so concerned about their fiscal discipline and fiscal consolidation. So social sector expenditure has taken a toll on this, especially education expenditure. So in that case, striking a fine balance between the private players' involvement and the public sector involvement commands a great deal of attention. So where to pitch in exactly for the government and where to withdraw from the existing things so that they can have a smooth management from the public finance aspect. So is it for the public provision of basic amenities or services for an individual? Services matters for an individual's contribution to education. So if the right infrastructural development or right infrastructural amenities are in place, so will that be an encouraging factor for households to rope in? And when you look at the current scenario, the publicly provided elementary education, because the lion's share of public spending is going for elementary education. It is about 42 to 45% of your total public spending. And the public spending share dwindles as it comes to the higher education level. So that is often complemented with financing by the parents and through students' loans. So in that case, this is precisely because of the nature of definition of the elementary education, secondary education, and higher education, because the definition based on the pure public good, merit good aspect. So, and again, there is a perception problem. Perception problem when it comes to elementary education. Mostly there is a quality debate happening on whether the private schools are good or public schools are good. But this is a reversal. A case reversal is happening for the higher education institutions. So this also matters, like the kids are going for attending the public educational institutions, some cultural and institutional factors also matter. But anyway, the point to be made is there is certain amount of private public mix to attain, mix are there to attain certain level of education. It is there for on an average individual. So in practice, we can say that they are never perfect substitutes or complements. But then what can be done? And most importantly, from the public finance aspect, crowding out of public spending is less severe in case of education financing. And it has got important policy implications for human capital formation and macroeconomic outcomes. And the one important policy implication we are suggesting that households' human capital investments are meaningful only when the public expenditure predates it. So again, the public economics question is addressed here from a developing country context. So how to plug in these loopholes? Basically to bridge in the gap existing in public provision and the private provision. When I see the private provision, you know that exorbitantly discriminating fees are charged by private educational institutions. So some kind of fee rationalization can be thought of, and common curriculum, standard curriculum for private and public, and constant review and monitoring of quality regarding the implementation and operation side of it should be done to make public education a closer competitor, private education a closer competitor of the public education. So otherwise what happens, the inequality in education widens because the rich families anyway complement while the poor families cannot complement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwati. You can stop sharing. Yeah. Thanks for completing it well within time. And as I am sure that all of you will agree with me, this was one of the fascinating presentation. It was very neat and clear. So Dr. Ashwati actually tried to examine the relationship between this government and household spending on education, and especially whether this relationship is substitutes or complements, and her result is that yes, the relationship is complementary in nature. And from the theoretical point of view, she has arrived at a testable equation from this intertemporal utility maximization framework based on this Aleph framework, not the usual Hicks-Allen framework. And then subsequently, from based on her theoretical model, even she has proved that even when there is an increase in this government spending, then the marginal utility of this household expenditure, education expenditure also increases. And this relationship she has examined both from this linear specification as well as non-linear specification. So she has established the robustness of the relationship, and even subsequently she tries to substantiate her theoretical findings with some empirical analysis based on static panel data analysis using several of these NSSO rounds of this education. So before the opening to this floor, we will go our formal discussion, very competent discussion. We have Dr. Bachaspati Shukla. So Dr. Shukla, you can take about 10 to 15 minutes time to discuss the paper.
Okay,
Now,
thank you everyone. So is it audible to all of you?
it's audible to
Hello?
me. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay,
You are
so
audible.
I will switch off my video because we have some internet issue. So Ashwati has made a very nice presentation. It is very clear, and she has put her view very clearly what she want to convey. So Dr. Injrit already have summarized her findings and about her paper. So I am not going to discuss in that detail. So actually, my comment goes through that when I read the paper, so I look into the structure of the paper. I have some observations in that. But the introduction section of the paper is quite long, 4 to 5 page, I think. So, and when we read it, sometimes it is not very kind of clear. So I will suggest that survey, please make it more clear and try to make it more precise. And when you go to the analysis section, it is quite short, within 1.5 page. So I think that need to be elaborate in more detail. So for a reader point of view, because I am just look the paper as a point of reviewer. When I get a paper from journal to review, the way I read the paper and write the review report, with same approach I gone through this paper. So she need to elaborate little more the analysis section. That is, and other point. So in somewhere there is some repetition in the paper, like when she was discussing about trends in the educational expenditure, there also in one paragraph she was again discussing about objective of the paper. So that need to be avoided because objective already have been discussed detail in the introduction section. So I will suggest her to reframe those paragraphs. So these are the overall. Secondly, when I come to the finding of the paper, so she has found that there is this public expenditure, private expenditure, household expenditure. We can say they are complementary. But when you look into the table which he has put in the paper, and where she have put the enrollment in the public education and private education. So over the year, there is tremendous increase in the private education. So in that way, is it a kind of substitution? So, but in result, there is some complementarity. So there is some, I find there is some contradiction coming from the both these findings. Why this is coming? Because what I thought from why this problem comes, because when we analyze the education expenditure, we analyze in terms of absolute expenditure or we terms of per capita. But things is that whether the per student expenditure has increased or not, that we don't analyze generally, and that is not done in the paper as well. So then we can say, see, in all the states, we have very different demographic structure. Per capita educational expenditure in Kerala might be different from Bihar because Bihar have large share of children's population, or we can say school going population. But in Kerala or Tamil or some other state, the school going population share in the school going population in share in total population is much lower related to those states. So in that case, we have to look into that whether the per student public expenditure has gone or not gone. So why this privatization increasing in the sense that government is not able to, or public sector is not able to fulfill the demand of the education system. So when people demand for education and the number of educational institutions are less because government public expenditure is less, so definitely there will be increase in the private education system and they will go for the private education system. In that sense, there is substitution in the public expenditure and government from household expenditure, but result is showing differently. Maybe because of these things we are not able to capture this per student expenditure and analyze that. That might be one thing. Second point I would like to say the integration result where if we look at it in both regression or linear and non-linear both regression equations, Rogge estimate, there is a negative relationship between the education expenditure and public expenditure. So that negative relationship is because is showing them substitutions. Well, I want her more little bit more clarity on that. So maybe I am not able to understand that in much more detail. Another point is that when we take the mean years of schooling in the regression, average mean years of schooling, that is for the whole population. And we know that population school going age population is a different kind of population. No, we go to school. We see if we look into the census data and analyze it, most of the people achieve their educational level till the age of 29 to 29 to 30. After that, their educational state don't change. But when we take measures which is estimated over whole population, so over the year the changes in the education is not well reflected in that kind of measure. That is another problem with mean age of schooling. In that say, I may suggest that she can take the mean years of schooling of youngest population group like 24 to 29 group. So that will be much better indicator in estimating the. So another point which I think is somewhere she have mentioned something which is some statement which we need to be careful about that. Like she have mentioned that higher education enrollment rate is quite low in our country, citing the 2014 data. But if you look at the recent data, so it is not that low. There have been tremendous, very high improvement in the higher education enrollment rate. And even the transition rate. For example, if you look into that youngest age cohort from 25 to 29, higher education enrollment rate goes to more than 30% in some of the state, like 3 states I can mention: Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Telangana. There it goes more than 30%. So that is quite high. Yeah, maybe at international it is low, but what we understand, that is not that much low. So these are few of my observation. So she may take incorporate and those things. Overall, I congratulate her for a very nice and very clear presentation. It was very interesting and very nice presentation, and she has explored very new dimension of the educational expenditure. So congratulate and thanks to Gift and Kiran and other Kiran, especially Kiran, for inviting me and making me the part of this very nice presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shukla, for providing constructive comments and some of the suggestions to improve the paper further. So she might be having reply of some of these questions, but Ashok will come back little later. So let us open for the floor. And it's open for both online as well as offline participants. So offline participants, you can raise your hand and you can ask questions. Then we will come back to this online participants. So let's start with this offline participants. If you have any clarificatory questions or some suggestions, you can make.
Chair, I may help you because since you may not be able,
Please, sir. Please, sir.
you may. Yeah, I'm always a very helpful person.
Yes, sir. We know that.
I note the presence of Professor Hari Kumar in Cochin University. I welcome him and also encourage him to enrich the discussion. And I think we will start with the offline people, perhaps, or online is. Yeah.
No, sir. But let us start with the offline.
Can you see everyone over here? You can see. Can you see everyone over?
Now I can see you only, sir.
That is the problem. This is the inequality which we are built in. This is the congenital inequality of IT. So, okay. So I think here I can see some hands here. I'm just helping Dr. Indrajit. Yeah. Yeah, I think Kiran has something to say.
Thank you, Ashwati, for a very wonderful presentation. I have comments both from the analytical section of it and also the empirical. So I'll first go into the empirical part, then we'll relate it to the conceptual part of it. One comment with respect to the estimation is the potential problem of endogeneity. See, your household expenditure is a function of a lot of other variables, and your public expenditure on education is not an exogenous variable. If you look at just the two plots, you know that states that are poor, they don't have enough resources to spend, they would be spending low. Individuals are also poor, they would be spending low. So it is bound to have that kind of a result, right? That is one. And second empirical problem which I see, I think could be addressed, but there is a problem because of the data structure. One is you adding a lag dependent variable. Okay. Now, the moment you add a lag dependent variable, it has a serious correlation with the error term. Right. That is what in econometrics is called nickel bias. It's an article by Stephen Lake and Nickel in Econometrica in 1981. As a response to that article, actually GMM has evolved in 1991. Now, that is, even if that is a smaller problem, the problem I see is because of the data structure, you can't help it. See, but the moment you introduce one lag, you're going 4 years before, right? And you're trying to say that, so how do we determine the length of the lag? So suppose if you have a continuous panel, one lag is basically last year, right? The moment you're going 4 years before, right? So that can also determine the entire result, right? So usually when we do this dynamic analysis, we also test at what lag it is, the effect is tapering out, right? But you don't have that flexibility in your analysis. Yeah. So, but when we don't have a continuous panel, I'm also quite skeptical about introducing lags where you are going back in time, unless we have an analytical justification for it. Okay. And then comes the other part. See, you have taken the total expenditure, right? See, now we can see education expenditure of a household, okay, which is totally independent of the public expenditure, right? For example, your books or other ancillary expenditure that is getting accounted in this, right? So could you separate it out and estimate it? That is possible. NSS gives that flexibility to separate because we have the item wise expenditure, right? So if you could test, because see, now there is some part of expenditure that household spends, which is independent of whether state spends or not. We have to spend it, right? Then the other part, again, I see at aggregate level, we can see this kind of relationship, but when it becomes all the more interesting only when you look at it at the aggregate level. For example, see, you also have 30 years period covered, and this 30 years also had lot more reforms in terms of education, especially starting from mid-90s. Privatization of education has flourished like anything, both in primary, secondary, and tertiary education levels, right? So why don't we then categorize? So you get this expenditure by the states on different, whether how much are we spending on primary, secondary, and tertiary, right? So until at least early 2000, tertiary education has by and large been heavily state driven, right? Then only when we have the technical education going up, private institutes started playing a leader role, right? So in that context, can we establish this relationship changing at various levels? For example, that relationship need not be the same when you look at technical education. School education, see for elementary, upper secondary schools, it is not the public education as much. Maybe it is the quality, that is the quality concern, wherein people who have money is shifting out to private schools, right? So my point is, can this relationship be same? I mean, can we draw a complementary relationship? Because there is a huge variation, A, in the way individuals spend at the time of the children's education, and B, the policies have also changed the entire educational system in India. So now, since we have 3 decades data, how do we plug in those aspects? Okay. And then that is a conceptual part. See, if you are doing an intertemporal, it is basically an expected utility function, right? Am I right? So if that is the case, then how are we seeing that? And see, it should be my present expenditure on education based on the future returns only I'm spending. But that's not getting captured in the empirical model, right? So that empirical model is not capturing the expected utility function that is used as a conceptual framework. So I somehow felt there's some disconnect between one theory model that you're setting up, but when it comes to estimation, it is slightly falling apart, right? And the third part is, see, if you look at the education expenditure, people have also looked at it from the opportunity cost of education, right? So wouldn't that become an important factor, and how do we see that? And there are minor observations, which I will leave it to you, we'll discuss, because many of them you have taken as a logarithmic values. For example, tax revenue and so on. We can remove it because, see, its size becomes a major factor. For example, UP, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, because they're large size, even the log values will be higher. But in reality, they may not be having high numbers if we adjust it with expenditure or population and so on. I'll stop here.
Thank you.
That
Yes.
the chair notices you.
Yes, yes, I can see now. But I cannot see any other hand. From the floor, is there any other questions or clarifications or suggestion?
Dr. Anub has a question.
Yeah.
Please
so-
go ahead.
So one clarification I want. In one of your slides, you mentioned that this marginal utility follows a near random walk. I am unable to understand what a near random walk is, because if you are talking about random walk, the idea is quite clear that it is IID, there is no relationship. If it's near random walk, how do you model it? Because a near random walk can be modeled in multiple ways with multiple implications. That is one. Second is regarding the estimation. So from what I understand, you have taken the survey data, this NSSO data, and 5 rounds, and constructed a panel analysis. Can we call it strictly a panel? Because by the strict definition, pseudo panel. So so if it's a pseudo panel like Kiran said, so even if in a pseudo panel, how do we ensure that these units, they are near identical? Are there any identification strategy, or you have just taken these panels together and done the analysis? So these are my clarifications I'd like to. Thank you.
Just.
Yes, is there any other? Yeah, madam,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
I'm Anita.
Gender
from
equity is to be
Millat
maintained.
Institute. Actually, I have, first of all, I congratulate her for a nice presentation, and we are very happy. My, some comments regarding the structure of education in Kerala. Actually, it's a composition of government and aided institutions. Kerala it's a different from other states. So the state is spending or giving salary and other things to the aided institutions, and compared to other states, it's a different experience. And how you can explain the complementarity only by telling the public expenditure per se. By demarcating this also, there is a demographic dividend. We have to get it from that, because the state is investing so much on education, and the private expenditure is even if it is complementing, the state's role is so much. I think compared to other states, you have to take it separately for Kerala. And another thing is your suggestions. Actually, from the detailed complementarity theory from the public expenditure thing, your suggestions coming into just not as strong. You are telling 2-3 general observations. These are the 2 comments here.
Thank you, madam. So any other questions?
I think Professor Harikumar is there. Professor Harikumar, are you over there? Hello. He was there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he's there
Oh,
in
yeah.
online.
Oh, yeah. Actually, congratulations for the presentation. I have gone through your paper earlier also. We had a discussion in our department on this. And now one point I would like to get clarification is the policy implication that you have shown, the crowding out of private spending. Would you elaborate that a little more?
Thank you, sir.
I think we should give her some chance to speak. Am I right? Or you are a question? Pardon? You have so many questions.
Okay, so Asudit, so we
I
can
think
go
we
for
should
second
take-
round. So
No,
yes.
after that, we'll take it up. No, we'll have more questions.
Okay. So but
She will forget all the questions.
yes, true. So there are some clarificatory questions raised by discussion also in terms
Yeah.
of this negative coefficient. How are you interpreting it? You can answer some of these things. And then Dr. Kiran raised questions about this endogeneity, when both the variables, your public expenditure and public expenditure and household expenditures are influenced by unobserved characteristics. And then this item-wise expenditure and even that this relationship could be examined at different levels of education. Then there is a clarificatory questions on this policy implications on your crowd out effect. Then near random walk terminology, your clarifications on this, how you say near random walk. Please go ahead.
I think I'm overloaded with questions and clarifications and suggestions.
That means you have a lot of friends here. If anybody is keeping quiet, beware of them.
Yeah.
Anybody is thinking and raising questions are your good friends.
Yes.
That's the point. That is the gift philosophy, you know that.
Yes,
Like,
sir.
that's-
So first I'll try addressing some of the questions and clarifications raised by the discussant. The mean years of schooling, as you raised, yeah, I have controlled for the age for the mean years of schooling. So it is between 29 and 35 years, which I've controlled for. And second thing regarding the regional variations I have not taken into account here, but definitely that could be thought of. And the coefficient thing, the negative coefficient thing, because the equation has minus nu. So when you interpret it, when you get a minus coefficient, it is actually minus and minus plus, considered plus, and you treat it as complementary, not substitutes. And then the trends, the per student expenditure thing that I have not taken into account. So probably because of that, per student expenditure, especially in the descriptive analysis. So that may be the result that you have seen that it is increasing, and it is not not in the empirical discussion. Second thing regarding the higher education enrollment thing, what you have raised, what I can say that there are a lot of data problems relating to it. When you consider the high gross enrollment ratio in higher education, when you take it from different sources, you get different results. So specifically, when you take it from, when you calculate it from the using NSSO data, you get a different result. Niti Aayog's data, it will be a different result. So those kinds of data issues I have found. That is what I have to comment on. Second thing, what Kiran has raised regarding the empirical strategies. Yes, why I have gone for a static panel data analysis is like the structure of the equation is like that. It has lagged values of independent and dependent variables. So if I go for a GMM estimation, my basic doubt was like, should we go for the dynamic optimization kind of thing? So I was not quite sure about that. So I attempted with this thing, but definitely I will expand my analysis in line with what you have told. And the GMM estimation and instrumental variable estimation, I have done it when I have analyzed only the household level expenditure. So that time it was quite easy to do because public expenditure and the other things were not in picture. So basically to phase out the endogeneity between income and education variable, I have done that. But when it comes to this kind of a theoretical modeling, how to go about it, I have to think and read a little bit more about it. And then, I'll reach a conclusion. Then a component-wise expenditure, well taken point. What you have said is instead of taking the total education expenditure, it will be more sensible to look into component-wise expenditure. And the relationship for the changing levels of education. So changing levels of education, I have done it using the unit level data, but not using the panel data because I thought since it's a macro level analysis, so I should look into average level of expenditure or per capita expenditure than this level wise education, like taking the education as a overall thing. Then near random walk thing, I have read it while I was analyzing this kind of a model, like this kind of a transformation strategy. What happened? The marginal utility is like a random walk. Basically, it's not a near random walk. It's like it is like a random walk thing. So over a period of time. So that is why I have used that term. But in most of the academic readings, I have seen it near random walk. That I will have later clarifications. Regarding the panel data thing, with the NSSO data, if you are considering the household level expenditure, you don't have any other option. You have to construct the pseudo panel. And many acclaimed academic works have done using this kind of a constructed panel. It may have its limitations, but always you cannot do the unit level analysis, data analysis using the unit level data. So sometimes for the macro level analysis or in a state across state analysis, you need to construct the panel, which will have its own limitations. But as I said, a lot of papers, like acclaimed works, which I am following, they have constructed the panel and done so. Then regarding the structure of the education in Kerala, when we analyze specifically for the state of Kerala, and also like some similar states like Tamil Nadu, Punjab and all having the trends of more aided colleges and more private colleges, that can be done when you do a state-wise analysis. And regarding the policy implications, yes, I told you it's a progressing work. So more work need to be done. This is only a foundation for that. So regarding specific policy implications, maybe probably we can think like come up with effective ones in later time period. And Harikumar sir's clarification for private spending, crowding out of private spending is less severe, because the whole proposition I want to put forward is your public expenditure and household level education expenditure are complementary in nature. So when it is complementary in nature, actually you crowds in rather than crowds out. So I thought of that aspect, and I I put across it is like the crowding out of private spending is less severe. I hope broadly I have addressed.
You have answered almost all the questions. So can we have a second round of the question answer session? If
Dr. Anil Kumar is here, yeah.
I have no questions, sir. One suggestion. Your presentation was, I appreciate your presentation. In your presentation, you tried to find out the relationship between public and household expenditure in the context of a developing country like India. My suggestion is, if we put this kind of questions, if we consider the broad socio-economic status of India, it would be better. For example, why we are spending for education? We have a purpose. Government has a purpose and the family has a purpose. The holistic development of the child. And the funding source come from Article 21A, ensures free and compulsory education. So government must spend. The spending capacity of the family depends on its economic freedom too. So what is the current situation of India in the field of education? As per the socio-economic census, 34% of the rural Indians are illiterate and 64% are literate. Among the 64%, 1/5 of the 64% is not completed the primary education. That is the situation. In the economic scenario, 80% of the rural Indians are living with a monthly income of less than 5,000 rupees. This is the situation. If we are examining this kind of questions in these hard realities, we will get another insight that will contribute to good policy sessions. Then we can make some policy sessions on what is the access to their quality education, what about the high dropout rates, what is the digital divide. All these types of questions can be addressed if we place these questions in the broader socio-economic realities of India. That is my suggestion. Right.
Sure, thank you.
can we have one or two more questions? Then we will go back to again Dr. Ashwati. We have already spent more than 20 minutes time for question answer.
No more friends.
Nobody else, then I shall ask.
Please go ahead, sir.
Students, you can have more questions.
It will be now after Dr. Vijay Mohan, it will be your fault.
Then I shall wait.
I think, any students have any questions?
I'll drink some water.
Pardon?
I'll drink some water.
Please bring water. Please. Okay, Dr. Vijay Mohan.
So I'm the last, right? Because I am asking a question because you haven't asked the question. From the theoretical point of view.
Okay, yeah.
So the presenter told us about ALEP framework, right? And the presenter has not told us anything about that. Then I heard that the chairperson telling about Hicks-Allen framework. I would like to know whether there is any difference between these two
Yeah.
or both are the same or not.
Okay. Yes, sir. When you have in the traditional Hicks-Allen sense, the goods can be substitutable or it's complementary. So when you have an unrelated, it's not at all substitutable and not at all perfectly complementary in nature, then the linear system of expenditure and demand analysis gives this kind of an approach for analyzing it. So correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I understood. Yes, sir.
It's not the theory.
Yeah.
The two are different.
Okay.
The two approaches are different.
Sure. I'll discuss with you, sir.
So I think there is no
Okay.
more.
I think I cannot afford not to be her friend, so it is, otherwise she will think that, that's. I think it's a very interesting question. And I think scholars are to be appreciated, not so much for the solutions that they come up with, but for the questions that they raise. I think in any social science, particularly in any research, questions are always more important than, I would say, answers. Answers would vary naturally depending upon, and your answer, I'm sure, one government of this India may take, other government may not take. That depends on their what is called their approach to the addressing the problem. But now the question then is, how sharply you have articulated a research problem. That is something which you can reflect. I think there is a problem you are asking. Now the question is, I think you see, also I must say that I should be very careful making a comment because before reading the paper, I have not read the paper. Please take, as I always say, take with a glass of salt, not a pinch. So this utility thing, from the traditional, typical microeconomic theory you have blindly taken by sitting here. I'm sure it will have its application. But I would have been a little bit more excited if you have put in some thoughts in terms of what are the merits and the problematic of using that framework, how much I can go, how much I cannot go. Please, say that, okay, when I go this much, you take. And education as a service, different from a commodity, in a developing country context, I am articulating it. So there are problems, but I'm using this, starting from this analytical, neoclassical microeconomic theory I'm taking. So this much I hope I can go, this much I cannot go. Please, that caveat somewhere. And that's the analytical part of your thing. And second thing is, you are actually running a model for this country, isn't it? India. It is much diverse than European Union. European Union is 28, 27 of them. We are 29 states. So, and also, you are actually creating your own problem. I mean, you are digging your own problem because you earlier said that the states are different. You already said that. Otherwise, if you said that these are all homogeneous states, no problem, one model will run for all the states. But you yourself said that it's very different. then why can't you have different models, some kind of like a state group of state specific dummies at least? At least.
That's why she's using the panel data.
And a panel data will take care of that problem? I don't think so. No, not heterogeneity is not panel. Panel data is.
Your professions are states, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So,
These are states.
State-wise.
Oh, this is,
State,
but even there, how will you?
that's pseudo panel, but the pseudo panel analysis we can do.
I didn't look at the number of observations that she has. Okay, yeah.
So what he's saying is not about the panel. You introduce a state income dummy and interact with that particular education expenditure, then you get different coefficients.
Whatever, because some kind of state
So that
specificity has.
Those coefficients need
That's
not
something
be-
which easily could be brought in because because anybody.
Cross-section units are not states.
Cross-section units are states.
Then what's the problem? Aggregation is there, right? That is how the pseudo panel data is carried out. No, it is not the question about the.
No, it's
Look, my point is very simple. Look, I'm talking like I'm not talking the econometrics here, the common sense of it. I remember Mark Rosenzweig in Yale, I remember, he ran a model for a country, and in fact, none other than Frances Stewart. She made a remark saying that, how can you make a model like this for a country like this? And without taking into account at least sensibilities of its heterogeneity. Can we bring in that? That will be much more, if you think that it takes care of, well and good. You say that I have taken care of it, I have taken, because you yourself set a ground for setting such questions to the reader. Because you said, then if it is possible to build in and acknowledging and recognizing that into the model, I would say that reader will be happy. And if you think that by running cross-section with the states, that essentially explains what explains the interstate variation. In the framework, essentially you are answering what explains the interstate variation if the states are your observations. Anyway, I think this must be taken for further discussion. And one thing, what I said, I appreciate that. Again, I firmly believe that we are not here very often to give, okay, this is the solution, take it and give. No, it's not possible. And there is a lot of things. I mean, this actually opens up a Pandora's box of research in terms of, that the states where, again, when you're talking about that, I think Kiran has already said, education is not a homogeneous commodity you're talking about. There is already existing literature talking about in terms of merit good. This is a private. This is actually, you're talking about elementary primary education, and higher education is an altogether different commodity. We are clubbing it together. And the utility of that, is it the same? Again, you have to ask that question. I'm trying to say that these are not that in one paper you are going to solve all the problem of the country in education. I'm not. But this is a very interesting starting point. And whatever you do should be robust. And I'm sure you will be able to do that. And I must say that this should be, it must be starting point for a number of inquiries, which he's talking about. Wow, how does it vary across different socioeconomic categories? It's a different research question. He cannot cover everything. But why I brought in the region is when you are doing this and already you said it, you raise this matter in the state, in your paper, and you have left that behind. When it came to, if you have not left behind, well and good. If you are not well, it's well and good. If you have left behind, be careful about it, because you may be caught on your path by a very articulate reviewer. He might catch you on the way. If it is, avoid that. That's it. Okay, thank you. Right.
Thank you very much, sir, for highlighting very insightful kind of suggestions. So one thing, yes, average doesn't speak everything. But one thing we need to remember, especially in theoretical model, we cannot accommodate everything. We have to be very kind of, we have to go ahead with certain sort of limitations, even when we talk about this theoretical framework. But yes, the comments from the floor are extremely useful because now you have established, you have examined this average relationship at the country level, and this overall education expenditure, and with the overall household expenditure on education. But now there is a scope to bifurcate the education expenditure from both the side. Even the household expenditure, as Dr. Kiran said, that which component it is getting spent, and even the this, I believe, this public expenditure also can be bifurcated. One comment from the floor has already come at the different levels, different types of education, as well as even the within public investment, that current expenditure and the capital expenditure, which one is complementary and which one is a substitute. So you can do many things now, because you have got a large number of the insightful comments. So, but we understand theoretical model. Always we have to have certain assumptions to go ahead with it, and to lead certain sort of conclusions. Those are certainly average conclusions, and it doesn't speak everything, but it does speak something. And in that way, you have done justice with it. I believe there are no more comments from the floor. I take this opportunity to thank GIFT, especially Professor KJ Joseph and Dr. Kiran, for giving me this opportunity to chair this session. I also learned a lot from this discussion. It was kind of very interactive sessions. Thank you very much. And I should thank even the discussion, Dr. Bachaspati, also for taking time to go through the paper and highlighting some of the limitations. So thank you one and all. So over to the organizer.
Who is going to do the formal thanking? It's okay. I think everybody is thanking, but then a formal. I think I must say that I think we started at 10:32, I suppose 11:32. Now it is 12:54, almost 1.5 hours. I think we are much better off during the last 1 hour. You made us much better off on the issue. We are much enlightened. Not only you, the chair and the discussant, and of course, all those who raise questions. And it is a very interesting seminar. And we thank, of course, you instigated this. And I welcome other. This seminar is very different in the sense that this is the first seminar from the newly recruited faculty, and I encourage others to follow. So maybe other newly recruited faculty, and that is not to make the old faculty relax. There should be a competition among yourself, and naturally students. And the students, then they are going to present next week. They are going to be trouble, and that's why I appreciate you to be the pioneer. That's why. And our online participants, all of them, I particularly thank Professor Hari Kumar for joining. And our chair was a very vibrant chair, and equally vibrant was our discussant. And I thought you agree with me in general that we are better off during the last 1.5 hours. You made us richer in knowledge. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.